Yep. Okay, it's 5:31. I'm going to call this meeting of the Old Saybrook Board of Education to order. We'll start by doing the pledge of allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, Kim Littlefield, tonight to our meeting.
No, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How many years
Glad to
in?
have you.
No,
I say at least 10.
It's been a little while.
So I'd like to start by doing the old board member appreciation. And I'll turn it over to Ann. Right.
Okay, well, let's see, Board Member Appreciation Month.
Yeah, there's a proclamation.
Yeah.
You want Karen to read it?
Which I'm gonna-
You want Karen to read it?
Yeah.
I want to read it. If you can see it, you can read it.
The following proclamation has been requested by Superintendent Peruccio. Whereas public education is the underpinning to economic growth and the overall stability of Old Saybrook and Connecticut, and whereas the mission of the public schools is to meet the diverse educational needs of all children and to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to a democratic society in an ever-changing world. And whereas local school board members are committed to children and believe that all children can be successful learners and that the best education is tailored to the individual needs of the child. And whereas local school board members work closely with parents, educational professionals, and other community members to create the educational vision we want for our students. And whereas local school board members are responsible for ensuring the structure that provides a solid foundation for our school system. And whereas local school board members provide an environment which encourages enthusiasm for learning for our children enrolled in Old Saybrook Public Schools. And whereas local school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the district. And whereas these volunteer representatives serve Old Saybrook's children well, giving tremendous time, energy, and dedication, and have greatly contributed to the future of this community, state, and nation. Now, therefore, the students, staff, and parents of Old Saybrook declare their appreciation to the members of the Old Saybrook Board of Education and proclaim the month of March 2024 as Board Member Appreciation Month in Old Saybrook. In official recognition, Trevor Nichols, Chairman of the Board of Education, signs this document on the 12th day of March 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you write this?
No.
Oh.
Where did it come from?
And we have a little token.
Okay, yes.
And actually, Kate, I'm gonna send everybody a note from Kate, from Patrice. She's been on,
Good job.
Hispanic 61, talking all about Cave and Dan Hill tomorrow and how much you can take like members from across the state advocating
Oh.
public there.
There is a little token.
Is this our annual bonus?
Get it every year, it's the same amount. Always the same amount.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wow. You are so well.
That's what I just said. I was like,
Yeah, not okay. I'm gonna open it. It's not that, probably not ones.
I could get some scissors. Let one person crack it open.
Everybody else.
We're all good.
There we go.
Hey, all right, Jane wins.
Pretty blue.
What does
What
it
does
say?
it say? Out of the public school grows the greatness of a nation. Mark Twain.
Oh,
Very nice. Did I know that? I don't think I did. Oh.
No, we ordered.
Very nice.
Jen and I designed.
The Lindy Lake.
Oh, that's nice.
That's the, yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Didn't they call it the Lindy?
We got to call the Mark Twain House and everything, because there was some discrepancy with the vote. And we wanted to make sure we got it right, so we got to
Yeah.
talk to the people at the Mark Twain House and looked it up in there.
Yeah, I read the quote, I'm like, I'm sure that's the way it is. We were right, Kate is wrong.
Yeah, Kate published it in her.
What is it? They're gonna have to, what is it?
There says,
Send it, Jack.
there says, out of the public schools plural, that's the greatest of any. The actual quote is no S on schools.
I think.
There should be no S.
Well, we'll just have to carry on that.
All right.
Other information.
All right, next is community communications,
Oh,
correspondence.
that's me, again. So, congratulations to our school system on receiving 3 Bonnie B. Carney Awards of Excellence for Educational Communications. They're all back here behind me, all these lovely plaques. Old Saybrook Public Schools website, our emergency action plan for athletes, our strategic plan year 2, and the Goodwin Domino Run. So CAVA, excuse me, CAVA has been honoring school districts with the Award of Excellence for Educational Communication since 1975. In 2016, the award was renamed in honor of longtime CAVE staff member Bonnie Carney in recognition of her 47 years of dedication to education focused on communications. So with this award, CAVE's goal is to identify and honor the hardworking people in school districts for their continuing effort to communicate effectively. That's a great honor, again, French.
Congratulations, Scott.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Big shout out to Brendan. This is his first time even
Yeah.
really, I think, doing those handbooks on his own. And so for him to turn out a product that won this award is really huge. And he's been an amazing partner for me and on the public relations end with the recognition that he's been able to get out for all of our student athletes. So huge tip of the hat to him.
You see a lot on Facebook, which
Yeah.
I love.
Yep.
Like,
He's
yeah.
been wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, if any, my next year goal is to find the music and arts counterpart for him so that we can up the percentage of that, but
Great PR.
yeah, he's been fantastic.
That's wonderful.
With that, I will bid you all good evening. I will see.
It's
20:30, yeah.
After Rotary. All right, our next is audience of citizens. I don't see any citizens. So I assume that's,
There's someone online, right?
double check.
Yeah.
And similarly, no student representative report?
We have it in the packet, but they're not here. Yeah.
All right then, it looks as if the next item is an approval of your meeting minutes from February 27th of this year.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next item is educational leadership, and specifically administrative athletic trainer bid waiver, which I think there's also materials in your own packet.
Yep. Yes, and I'm gonna turn it over to Pamela Storey, who put together a really terrific report. At the end of this, what we're looking for is a bid waiver, and she'll explain why. So Pam, if you would, thanks.
Sure. So I wanted to include in this memo a fairly brief history of our struggles with finding athletic trainer services. The service that we standardly provide is to have an athletic trainer on premises. I think it's 1:30 to 6:30, 5 days a week for practices. And any games that are held during that time, they're there to assess any student injuries, but also to help with development of our athletes. And additionally, they will come additional time if we have home games. They don't travel with the teams. Our athletic trainer provides care for our team and visiting team during games, and then for our teams during practice. So what we have been having trouble trying to get consistent services. we had a contracted service for all of fiscal year 21. Fiscal year 22, we had that same contract service, that termed their contract after a month due to lack of staff. Excuse me. We hired an individual who committed for the rest of the year, who stayed 7 months because they got a different, better offer. And then our nurses jumped in to provide a base level of game care, so kind of first aid at games to be there for students who were injured during games, but we did not have coverage for practices, but it got us through the end of that year. We spent the summer searching, bidding, trying to get services for last year, and we had no luck. We bid with no takers, no offers, no proposals whatsoever. When I say we had town agencies covered for 10 months, that was between Saybrook Ambulance initially. They would have an ambulance on site for games. And then our police department first responders provided first responder for games. So we were missing that conditioning help, that practice, being on scene if, somebody was having either a significant or minor injury, but helping our students to be prepared to better train and prevent accidents and injuries. So for this year, we went out to bid again. And it took us some time. We ended up continuing having town agency coverage for a month. And then we were able to contract with, I want to make sure I get the name right. Physical therapy and sports medicine centers. So what they do is they provide us one person, they pay them, they provide their benefits, their salary, and they contract with us for 35 hours per week when sports are in session, plus additional coverage if needed for games that they bill out, I think at $50 an hour. They have found that in order for them to retain the staff, they need to increase the wages. So they have preemptively given us a proposal for services for next year. That would total $77,000 for the year for 35 hours a week. I have reviewed area 8 athletic trainer contracts. They run anywhere from 30 to 35 hours a week. One is up to 40. The one that's 40 hours a week is 75,000 plus they provide the full benefit package, which for us conservatively, even single coverage is over $10,000. So when you're looking at that, I also took a look at trying to compare perhaps other staff members we have that are actually our employees versus a contracted service. We have occupational therapists and physical therapists, both who make in like the mid 80s for services they provide to our special education students, roughly for the same time period. So although it seems like a large amount of money, when put into perspective, the level of care that you're asking of them for their knowledge and to provide accurate assistance for our students. And we're concerned that if we were to go out to bid again, we would have a disruption of services. We've finally gotten one person, the same person every week, who has consistently been there for our students, as opposed to a rotation of no one ever knows who's going to show up and only for games. And additionally, we've had so little luck going out to bid, the time and effort that would be involved in placing a bid. And we had 2 years of very little luck. We finally have a vendor who has been able to provide us that consistency. So for those reasons, I had suggested to Jan to explore the possibility of asking for a bid waiver. And so that's what we're presenting to you today.
They just aren't out there. At the end of the day, that's the problem. We just don't have it. When we find an agency that can give us somebody consistent for a couple of somebody's even, then that's the best thing. We did get a number of parent complaints and we didn't have a trainer there for training and for wrapping. And rightfully so, but it wasn't from lack of trying. So we'd like to hang on to this situation. And Pam, thank you for doing all that background homework on what we're paying other people. And the waiver information on the policy is on the back of the page. You can understand under what conditions. And I would say that, given that we've had no luck getting people to bid, I would say number one is, could be relevant. Certainly, number 5 there could be relevant.
So Pam, where's the agency from? You mentioned the name of it. Where are they from?
I think they have
They've got
physical therapy,
Edinburgh.
they have physical therapy offices. I think they have in Clinton. I
The
think they
closest one
have.
is in Westbrook off of exit 64.
Oh, no,
They're all
I'm asking,
office
so it's easy for them to, or maybe the person they come won't have to travel to. Right?
I think
Well, they
this
can
is
follow
their
it.
job. I think this is their job. I don't think they work out of the office providing physical therapy and then come to us. I think they
They are
have
hired as
hired
an
someone
athletic
under
trainer.
their practice and
So they're there.
so they're not traveling back and forth from
No, I
the office. I
understand, yeah.
believe they're.
So it's local. Thank you.
Well, I have a question. Do we need to make a motion first before we go into discussion and ask questions?
Sure. Whatever your normal practice is, that's typical for Roberts, right?
Yeah.
So, sure.
All right, I'd like to make a motion. The Old Saybrook Board of Education authorizes a bid waiver in the amount of $77,000 for the proposed fiscal year 25 athletic trainer services contract.
Sorry.
So now-
Any discussion?
Yeah. So in the contract, will it be, because I agree that the value of having a consistent person brings, right, will it be stipulated that it will be a consistent person? And that they will provide, like, how do the students avail, or the athletes avail themselves of the training aspect? Like, is that part of it where the student would go up to the trainer and say, hey, I need some advice on conditioning for X, or how does that work?
I believe the trainer has a trainer room in the high school, so they have their own office.
Okay,
And then I believe that would be facilitated through their coaches, depending on the sport.
okay,
And it's my understanding that the athletes are very comfortable in working with the athletic trainer, asking questions when they have concerns, as well as the coaches can refer them if they, whether they're rehabbing after an injury, whether they're looking to prevent injury.
And as far as the dedicated person, this company did their very best for us this year. I mean, obviously people go on vacation and things, but in past years, we've had people get partway through a season and they get a better job. They're
Right.
gone.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's another one of those careers where there's such
Yeah.
a shortage.
And this is something that's done at every school in every district.
Yes, we have, like Brendan was able to provide to me, comparisons for Lima, Lime, Morgan, Westbrook Valley, Old Saybrook. I think every district has their own, because then they're responsible for the home games.
Right.
So if we're traveling to Westbrook for a game,
It's
Westbrook's
Westbrook's
trainer
Trainer.
is the one
Yeah.
on site for game issues.
Yes, is there a state requirement for the minimum certification or degree required to fill this position?
Yes, there is a certification for athletic trainers. I don't know much about it, I'll be honest. We can get that information. from
So I should presume that.
I don't think it's a state Department of Education one. I think it's a physical trainer certification.
Yeah.
But as I'm with Dan on, I don't know any more than that. Brendan probably knows more.
Martin certification, but similar to Jan.
Okay.
Let me ask Brendan to get back to you. Yes.
I'm assuming that the service that we're gonna go with is gonna fulfill those requirements
Mhm.
for. And doesn't have the education, but within that field of study. And part two, where does Sarah Sullivan fit into all this? She's listed on the site as an athletic trainer.
That could be the name of the person that is currently providing the, athletic train. I don't know our current individual's name, honestly.
But she will be going away.
No,
Like the
this
same
is,
person.
this is the same company that we have. Whether they, yeah, it's a continuation of the same company we have, whether they assign the same person, whether that person is still here, whether they have rotation. But it would be similarly certified, supervised, and managed by the same company.
Steve,
Just curious, all athletes in all sports have equal access to the athletic trainers?
That play at our facility, yes.
Jane,
So I'm, just because I don't know all about the way we hire employees and things, so this is not our employee.
No, this is a contracted service.
Yeah, and is there a comparable, arrangement that we have in another department? I'm just curious, is this a really unusual kind of contract, or is it like what we do for?
No,
something?
so in this case, because there are very clear definitions of what's a contracted service and what's an employee. Our physical therapists, our occupational therapists are our employees because we direct their work. The athletic trainer is supervised and managed by their company, Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine Centers, to provide a service to us. So similar to a legal contracted legal services, Shipman and Goodwin supervises and then, she provides a service to us based on that contract.
But they are familiarized with, say, screening for background check.
They are required, similar to anyone who works with students, whether it's a coach or
Bus
otherwise.
driver.
And the
Yes.
bus drivers are contracted as well, because they're with students, they have to
Vendors have to do
maintain
that.
all of that. And their employer has to verify that they've met all those conditions. We additionally, sometimes have the opportunity to have them go through our training. For instance, if we're contracting, temp, to work for us, we will have them make sure that they go through the child abuse training and the DCF training and so forth, the things that, might not be normal to their company. So we always make sure, but in this case, athletic trainers have a very high standard that they have to for
They're held
working
to the
with
same
students.
standard as coaches and teachers, and Ann is right, it is Department of Public Health, they have to have a bachelor's degree, and they have to sit for a board exam. Become called an athletic trainer.
So are they present at all games?
They are present at all home games,
All home games, yes.
all home games.
Okay,
And then during practice
and
times.
middle school as well,
No,
not middle school.
high school.
Okay,
But keep in mind, all our coaches are required to have first aid, CPR.
okay.
And so they're fully trained and they have their medical bags for the middle school students. So anytime, you
Okay.
always have that first aid person.
Okay. Okay.
Any further questions?
Just one,
Okay.
and as I assume that this is even, but we're happy with the services that we're getting from this provider so far.
Yes,
And we have the ability to give feedback and evaluation on that.
I don't think we do an evaluation, but we do give feedback.
yes.
Any other questions or
Just a question,
comments?
only because I'm always interested in student feedback. So is there an opportunity, maybe at the end of the year when they work, how they felt that that particular agency, was helping them?
We've not.
Just a lot. They're the recipients of their services.
If there's no further discussion, there's pending motion, which has been seconded, so, all in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions, motion carries unanimously. All righty,
Thanks, Pam.
thank you. Update on budget and ongoing process.
This will just be quick. I'm just gonna say that for those of you who weren't here, Board of Finance, I'm sorry, the budget presentation, I thought went very well. So did that Board of Finance meeting. I think it went very well. Very well received by a rather large crowd this year. I think between 100 and 150, don't you? Right? Yeah. So, but very positive, some good questions, but very, very positive. We are now at the point where, they will very soon set the date for the referendum, call the town hearing, set the date for the referendum, and that'll be usually about the second week in May. I think we're in really good shape this year. I think if we made a point of saying, if you look along the line, we're coming in very, very low. And so, pretty pleased about that. And that was just timing. We just had a number of teachers decide that they're retiring this year. So we'll be able to, make some changes there.
Just wanted to comment for those of you that weren't there, that Jan received huge accolades from the first selectman in terms of working together, and I think that that's something to be commended, because in our other schools or systems, you don't have, sometimes you'll have general government, concerned with general government, and then you'll have a superintendent interested in the schools, but in this particular case, it was very well articulated. And that the relationship between the town government and the superintendent was something really to be recognized, and everybody stood up for Jan. And that's something that's really important for those of you who weren't there, so you get a sense of really what was ensured. And that doesn't happen with every superintendent, so congratulations to Jan.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you very much. That was a very moving night. I went home very excited. I'm going to get a star on the refrigerator.
Star.
You know, but I did mention that, you know, that the board had supported the budget, that there had been a small movement of money from one account to another. So I did mention that, but that's really it.
Any other feedback for Jan or questions about the budget process? No, okay, great. Now, Board of Ed Superintendent summary, goals to date and transition plans. I assume we're gonna start off with you, Jan.
Oh, I've got the place to
Yeah,
start.
absolutely.
Right, so, you know, I would think I'd like to start with the transition plan. So Chris Dresdick and I were together yesterday. He met the central office staff. He met with the district leadership team. I gave them some time alone together. And then he was sat at our district leadership team meeting and actually weighed in. I invited him to weigh in on a few issues that'll be sort of long running issues. He's coming back next Wednesday, I want to say, and also the following week. I can't remember what day, Wednesday or Thursday. I'm trying to reach out to Carl tomorrow and see if he can meet with him then. And I also asked if he wants to meet with any other department head, we can make that happen too. And so we'll have a full day of events. We're also we have some meetings that he'll just attend, part of the regular course of business with the superintendent. And I invited him to come to the show, the musical at the middle school. So he may be able to stick around for that. Oh, that must be a Thursday then. So hopefully we'll get to see him a couple more times, and then he and Krista connected. They shared phone numbers and email and are going to be connecting more frequently, you know, towards the end of April. And he's very excited. You know, he's very excited to get started. So, you know, I think we'll be seeing a lot of him as we transition.
Well,
It's great.
Will we have an opportunity while you are still here to sort of meet teachers at all? To meet any of this
The
other
next
staff?
time he comes, we're going to go to the school.
Okay.
Maybe we'll hit all three. Most likely we won't. We'll probably hit
Okay.
two, and then the following week hit
Okay.
another one, and make sure that everybody gets an opportunity. Did anyone else just hear the workshop?
I did, yes. I did.
Maybe that was family member.
Oh, that could have been, yes.
I just say yes. I hope so, because otherwise somebody else is here and I don't know who it is.
So that's gonna go
Okay.
very well. So far, I've gone over like any outstanding things that we've been working on. Brought him up to date on any personnel, student type situations where he can, not so much the details, but more about where he can get the information, who's the keeper, all that. I'm keeping a folder for him, Trent's keeping a folder for him, so he'll be up to date on all of that. And I think that's it. That's really what I wanted to share. I think next time he's here, I'll be talking. Thanks, Jane. I think I want to talk strategic plan with him more. We did talk a little bit about that, but we'll go into that. And maybe that segues nicely into our strategic plan update, which is itty bitty teeny tiny thing. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because when it was handed to me in the final version, I thought,
No.
I'm glad that someone else typed this, because
I did.
so let me just go over that. Anything you see in blue, under benchmarks is a high quality instruction. Red is professional learning, and green is leadership structures. And then you can see that these are either identified as being on track, or you will see that they are not started. Nothing at this time is completed, but that's about where you should be right now. I'm sure that this will look different in June than it does now. items that are identified as on track have been discussed at administrators' mid-year meetings with me. They've been discussed in an ongoing way at district leadership team, and they've been discussed and implemented in the buildings at faculty meeting, professional development opportunities. Everything here should look familiar to you because this is what we've been working on all year, except for the more recent updates. And so the more recent updates can be found in the far right column. And you can see it's Goodwin is first, followed by the middle school, followed by the high school, and finally, student services and curriculum. They are definitely keeping to their goals. They're moving things along. They're writing down where they're having complexities and difficulties.
Is this online?
I'm just gonna ask the same question.
Yeah, it's in the executive session of here. Yes, you can see it there. And I'm happy to take any questions or review any section as long as you tell me where we're looking.
I just have a general question.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about the goals and progress? Are you satisfied? Do you have any concerns?
No, I don't have any concerns because at the mid-year, I asked every administrator, you feel like you're gonna be on track? If there's something that won't be done in June, because that's their opportunity to tell me I'm not gonna be done with this.
Right.
And no one expressed any real concern. The only concern, there were two, and not surprisingly, from our two newer administrators. So student services is saying that if she had it to redo now, she would have redone some of her goals based on, doing some quick assessments of where she thought people were on certain issues. And she's learning more about that. But we decided that it's kind of late to make that big a sweeping change. So she's gonna stay the course, amend it a little bit. We talked about ways she could amend goals with teachers at the student teacher level to position things for next year. And then curriculum, I can talk to it specifically. In curriculum, the creation of unit scope and sequence and documents for each content area by June 30th. That has not been started yet, so that will not make it to the end by June 30th. And that was just a question of time. And again, needing to reassess the starting point on some of that. So I expect that you'll see that goal, that action step come back next year.
And one other question, with respect to, when you're meeting with Chris. So you'll give them sort of a play-by-play of how they submit their goals, you review them and provide feedback on whether the goals are appropriate or not.
Actually, that part we already did with Kristen in the room. So the three of us
Okay.
talked about that. Right now. That I'll now tell him the rest of the story. I'll share this document with him. And he can pick up from there. He and Krista can.
Any other feedback or questions for Jim? Jim?
Yeah, the Kathleen E. Goodwin school goals, there's a lot of assessment and predictions for reading improvement. Do we have any thoughts or plans to do anything about math?
So they focused on reading this year because they have to implement the ARC program, the new reading program. This was my frustration with the state that we wanted to focus on mathematics and instead we found ourselves writing school goals that were reading associated. Teachers in the classroom are doing work with learning targets and meaning. They put the goal up on the board in whatever form is appropriate for the students and then ask them to self-assess what they learned that day. So they're doing that for areas like mathematics. And so that's being done. But we're sticking with the same program that we've been using, the one that we adopted, 5 years ago now, which at the elementary school is Bridges, because it has been effective. Where we're focusing our work is on those cohorts that seem to have struggled with our math assessments. So our ML students, our special education students. And so there's some additional work being done there.
Okay, I just didn't see any reference to it,
But
so I
in all honesty,
want to make sure it's not being
not enough.
thrown under the bus.
Yeah, no, not enough. I'm being totally honest because we're so overwhelmed with the reading piece.
Just looking through the athletics activities, physical education, I don't see anything in regards to in the last meeting we talked about, again, I had asked what the status is of the meetings
Right.
and the group discussions, and there's nothing in here. I just didn't know where we are and all of that.
So did you get the email that I sent out about that? I sent it to all board members?
I didn't.
The last couple of days.
I've been a little tied up lately.
Oh, okay, yeah, so the answer came, it should be in your Saybrook email, and it would have come right after that meeting. And it was Brendan's response to that.
Okay.
If
We could just get it into the minutes, that'd be great.
I'm sorry?
We could just get it into the minutes, that'd be great.
Yes. Yeah, so he did respond to that, and I'm gonna go through my sent folder, that's probably easier. Here it is, banner update. This was sent on March 1st. Dear board members, at our meeting on February 27th, the board requested an update on the banner of Noah Jets Gym and notes related to the former Captain's Council. Athletic Director Saunders has compiled information on both topics. This is from Trent. There's actually photos included on the new banners that are up. Talking about the plans for the rest of the work, which involves some fundraising, and they're thinking of auctioning the old banners. Because it's almost $23,000 expense. That caused a little bit of a stall, and then there's also an update on the captain's council.
So did he just meet with the captain's council, or did he involve parents and other people?
So there
Because there
were,
was supposed to be a committee, if I remember correctly, that also involved parents.
yep, there've been 2 meetings of the banner committee. Many discussions have also taken place during the Ram Booster meetings, which is parents. We will invite people interested in this topic to attend the next Ram Booster meeting, tentatively set for 3/13. All team banners, Shoreline State Champions, that are currently displayed in the gym, except for those currently being updated. Quote was received from the Nixon Company to replace all state banners, $22,850. We would go from 33 all state banners to 10. Possible funding solutions, auction of old banners. So
So
that's
tomorrow there's a meeting.
So yeah, it sounds like they're gonna handle it at the Ram Boosters meeting.
Just a clarification to the captain council thing was like a separate topic.
Yes,
It's
captain
not
council
related to
is-
the banner.
yeah.
That was based off
Yeah.
of a question that I had asked about, like how the captain council is leading, like leadership, like the leadership activity and what the feedback was and kind of some things, so.
Yeah. Yeah, those things don't have, were you thinking those had something to do with each other? Oh, I'm messing.
The captain's council and the Ram booster?
Yeah.
Just so
You
I'm
will-
following along.
Yeah, well, what I was trying to understand is there was supposed to be a committee specifically put together for this. So it sounds like there's a discussion in the captain's council.
What?
And there's a, there's
No, I think that was a separate meeting.
Roosters.
There were
Captain's
two,
council was
there were
separate.
2 meetings of a committee, and now it sort of sounds like it's been absorbed, probably a lot of the same people by the Ram Boosters, which is parents.
That's where they're addressing it.
There were just 2 topics that came up related to sport that night. Separate was the captain's council and the feedback on leadership initiatives and some of the other things. And then the banner question that you had asked was the banner question that you had asked in the captain's council and that I had asked, and they addressed it in the same paper. On a separate topic, for going back to the goals on student services.
Okay.
For the utilized protocols to determine if student goals, this is in the red, the last one in that bucket. It says it's tabled for the year, does that mean that we're taking it off and it's gonna come off completely?
It's tabled for the year because this is the one that she realized we were not far enough along to do
Okay,
that.
so it's just coming out.
Any other questions or feedback?
I want to say, the credit for completing this kind of belongs to all the administrators who organized it, put it together, sent it in to Dr. Fletcher and forwarded it to me, which I think is great, because it says the ownership is there, they know what they're doing, they know what each other is doing. Just as an aside, I received a compliment from a teacher today saying, everybody knows what's going on here. I've never seen that in a district before. And I kind of pressed her on that. She said, well, like, people know what the strategic plan is. I said, well, that only took 10 years. And
My work
they,
here is done.
and It's a plan.
That's
And you know, she was just full of compliments about how well the staff knew the goals, knew where we were going.
Just as a question or follow-up, we had talked initially when we put this together about what kind of the communication plan was gonna be outside of like posting it on the website and how we kind of give progress updates, because I agree with you, I think the staff is very well versed into what the strategic plan is. I don't know how much the community knows about the progress of the of the strategic plan.
I can speak to that. The Public Relations Committee is working on a more manageable version of this. Because this is obviously too much for, you know, for parents in the community. Trent is doing his semi-annual videos that say how we've moved the plan forward, which are nice little bites of information that go out full of pictures of kids and fun things. So those go out every you know, September, October, and May, June. So that will happen again. And it gets housed on the website, and we do push it out when it gets updated at the end. It's a lot of reading and it's a lot of curriculum and teacher talk. So it is very hard, I will say, to get the community excited and engaged in a strategic plan. You have to have like the equity and, you know, high quality instruction. That is absorbable. The rest of this, you're right, is not something that people think about too much.
Just thinking about like how we can communicate like the key initiatives to show. Because there's a lot of feedback that goes into developing the strategic plan for the beginning, it's a 5-year stint,
Right.
so.
Yep. One thing that is being done, I know Heston's doing it on his newsletter, is he's including the buildings goals that are tied to the strategic plan at the top of his newsletters.
Right.
To sort of keep that fresh.
Mhm.
And each of the other schools is doing it in a different way, and I can't remember how, but we did have this discussion, and that was a decision that they made about how to move it out more regularly to parents.
Actually, I want, no, not to be pedantic here, but, high school goals, safe and supportive environment, the SMARTY goal is there will be a 10% increase in student learning needs being met, reported amongst, Old Saybrook High School students. That sounds like a very random goal, and how does that actually measured in terms of a learning metric?
Yeah, they're gonna have to use surveys primarily because, this is that personalization piece. Do you feel like you have access to the kind of learning that you need? And at the high school level, that is to grow from one grade to another, from one class to another, and then eventually considering your future goals. Are you getting what you need out of our programming? And that's both curricular and extracurricular. So one of the things we talked about with the high school one is a little bit of weakness is, they're very personalized, and so you have to rely a lot on surveys. And then the other one is a lot of their goals are end of year goals, and they're using big assessments for that. And so there isn't a lot of time to tweak and change. So they've been measuring inputs up to this point, and now they're gonna have to start looking at outcomes. It's a slippery slope, and we talked about that because it's too late to make changes when you're at the outputs at the end, you know? So they know that, and they want to rethink that for next year.
Do you and the school administrators find that student surveys are a trustworthy source of getting down to the goals that you're trying to achieve?
Well, we rely on them a lot. I can tell you that. We rely on them for the climate surveys. The Equity Action Coalition is, some of the students on that are creating surveys now to give to their peers, and they actually did one for our multilingual learners about how they feel they're included. So we rely on surveys as student feedback a great deal, especially at the high school where kids are doing their own thing.
Okay, great.
Great.
The thought about the surveys, is that usually sent out via like a Qualtrics or some sort of Survey Monkey type of
We
thing?
tend to use Google now.
Okay, I wondered too, this just popped into my head, like sometimes you could do it right in the classroom and have them use their phones
We've done that.
and track it that way.
We've
That,
done that.
you know, that might increase response, you know, if they're all in a captive audience.
If I remember correctly, we don't let them use their phones in classrooms. We put them, remember there was beginning of the year,
Some
lock
do
them
put them
up.
away and some others don't.
You can, if you're directed by a teacher, you are allowed to use your phone.
Yeah, I would imagine it's not.
Although the governor does have a bill in place saying that that will be stopped.
But that wasn't my original question. That just kind of randomly popped into my head.
Bill.
One, is there any consideration, this might be a career question, is there any consideration given for professional development for teachers and administration to get some training around metrics, measures, goals, right? Because like, that's what I've noticed is that there's an inconsistent skill of measuring things correctly, maybe identifying a SMART goal
It's
and knowing,
It's been an area of focus this year. We've been doing data sprints.
okay, good.
And the part that everybody's struggling with, no, that's not fair. The part that some people are struggling with is then what to do. How do you implement the data?
Right.
To make decisions, future
Yeah.
decisions.
Good, okay,
But that is something that we've been working on.
good.
And modeling it both at the building level and the classroom level with varying levels of success.
It's a
I
hard
think that's
thing.
Got to keep going
Yeah.
in the coming years.
Yeah, it's a skill that's necessary, especially when you have a really strong strategic plan.
Yeah.
But it's a hard thing.
It's a hard thing.
It's a hard.
And it's just getting over the concept in education that data is not just numbers.
Right.
Data is also, you can collect what's going on in your classroom and use an observation, a
Qualitative,
survey, feedback from students, both qualitative and quantitative. That in and of itself took, I'd say, about 2 years to get people calm about the use of data and how helpful it can be to our own instructional techniques.
Good. Good, thanks.
Yeah, that's ongoing work though.
Anyone else on this topic?
Just one other comment, sorry. On the things that are not started yet,
Mhm.
it might be helpful in the progress just to see, like,
When
when
do
do
they
they plan to
anticipate?
start them? Like, is this gonna be like we're sliding in the last week of the year, getting it done, or is there like a target to start at? a
No.
certain-
I honestly think most of the things that you see as not started will end up being a follow-up. So for, in the following year. So students in under high school, students will contribute to the writing of daily learning targets and students will self-assess their progress towards daily learning targets. That may get started at the very end of this year, but it took longer than anticipated for teachers to be comfortable utilizing high-quality learning targets that they then talked about in the classroom all the time, not just put it on the board, but keep referring back to it during the lesson. So using walkthroughs, using observations, administrators went through and determined that, we're not at critical mass there to move on to the next step. But students are engaging in learning target conversations. We want them to start creating their own learning targets, and that may not happen very much this year. It probably will get piloted in a few places.
I think that's fair. I guess the comment would still be then, like, maybe in the update, it's saying like, we don't think that we're gonna get to this year.
Yeah.
It's upside if we do, but it's gonna be pushed to next year, or the target's gonna be shifted based off of, X, Y, and Z factor or whatever. Because if not, then the comments in the progress review just say the same thing, that it's not started yet with like no other additional line of sight as to when it might start.
So do you want an update now? Is that what you want, or you want to wait?
I mean, it's just more of a comment for the next update for me personally.
Gotcha.
I don't know if anybody else feels like that.
No, I agree with you on that, and I don't think we need it for this, but there should be more information about.
Feedback.
Yeah.
Okay.
With,
I might be able to get it, and there's so few of them, I might be able to get this and just send it as an email, because otherwise I'll feel like it's left open-ended, and then Chris will have to follow. So I'll just add it to this and give it to him, and then he can talk to you more about that in June. All right, I'll just get it, send it to you.
Well, I don't know if this is the right, I don't know if this is the right topic, but
Yes.
since we're on communication about the strategic plan and the results, and a little bit of PR, in terms of, the metrics that we heard, I think it was back in December, regarding the concerns with how we were progressing, I forgot what grade specifically, the maps, yeah.
Flat scores.
Yeah, and that's something that people can kind of take those little nuggets and worry about them and wonder how we're doing. I do think it would be helpful if the PR group could formulate some ways to communicate how we're going at that. You know, from a curriculum level and, you know, different ways. Not sure how the Board of Ed influences any of that, you know, but just, I do think parents are concerned about that. And we want to be able to have that message coming from the school and not through Stop and Shop.
Right, thank you, and thank you for bringing that up, because I had an opportunity to meet with a reporter, the reporter who covered that, that particular board meeting, and I had an opportunity to say, by the way, our scores did not plummet, they are flat. We had this huge increase in one year, and if you look at our numbers now, and you look at our numbers from a few years before COVID, our percentages are about the same. But we're not growing, so we're gonna fix that, and we've identified where is the population that we're not growing with. That's the part that's tricky to convey. That we have a certain populations that we need to be doing a better job, how to say that without singling out certain kids. But that's something I can bring to PR. They have a meeting next week. So thank you. But that gave me a chance to say that again. That article was grossly.
How many times did you want to say this?
I said it to her, the person who wrote it, I said, and by the way.
Do you want to roll into communication?
Please, I'd be happy to. So you have a communication report also in the right side, and you see this every year. This has not changed at all. It is remarkable how much communication comes out of our schools and our central office. And so these are broken down by school. I also want to point out, these do not include individual teacher communications to their classes. So I know that the elementary school teachers tend to communicate on a weekly basis with all their classes, so that's not here. And I'm very impressed with the different media that's being used. The type of information, celebratory, particularly using our social media, celebratory and informational and urgent, and that's all there. The other thing that you have are the Google Analytics with a defining document, which I think you'd asked for at a previous meeting, that explains each of the categories and what they mean, and I'd be happy to entertain a question. Please don't ask me the specifics of an email from a long time ago. I probably won't be able to answer.
Any comments, feedback, questions?
My only feedback would probably be the same as it was last time, Dan. I get most of my information from the live feed, and going by the list of this, you know, it seems like 90% of the live feed comments are about sports and the boys team to this, the girls team to that, and we have virtually nothing about academics on here in terms of people being awarded Rotary Student of the Month for science technology or math awards and things like that. Maybe they're better represented in other things like Twitter and Facebook, which I don't particularly get into,
Right.
but I'm old, so. Just wanted to make it clear that maybe you should have a wide representation of different topics on different formats of media.
Yeah.
And making sure that they're all balanced so
Yep.
that people get a full flavor of what Old Saybrook education is all about.
Yeah, this is a case of the success of the athletic department.
I don't
Keep doing this,
disagree with
and
that.
then so it feels like
They're
these
doing a
others
great
are
job.
left behind. So I know Trent spoke to that tonight as far as the PRPs. We've got to find ourselves a partner in those other areas to do that work, to do the academic piece. I agree with you.
And to piggyback on that, it looks like those individual schools strictly rely on email rather than other mediums. There's sporadic use of things like the
Yeah,
live
you're right.
feed, but it's like for both Goodwin, middle school, high school, there's a lot of no's in those other colors.
Yeah. Part of that is a security piece. They do have to go through Trent with pictures and things, and so we don't give too many people access to social media. Sports is different because that's a public setting. And so Brendan has more ability to present stuff. What you can do with the musical and the play, which we did do, is you, because they're acting in a public setting, you can post those. At least that's my understanding.
And then news is newspaper, right? Which is,
Yes.
we know, so hard to get.
Yes, it is.
And you can submit a million things and they just choose not to.
Yeah.
print it.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, they're tough.
I only see, occasional things. I didn't know why that was the case. Okay.
That's the first.
I've noticed that our local newspaper, remember, we live in an area, and this is not to your point, Jim, but this is about the newspaper. We live in an area, we get very little coverage from the big newspapers. Some superintendents look forward to that because the coverage that you get is often not something celebratory.
Case in point.
Harbor News, right, exactly. Harbor News, I find if I've gone through a few times and counted articles, they tend to be more about Clinton.
Oh, Clinton's
Exactly
right.
They're all over the place.
Clinton's had
Right.
it. That's right.
There tends to be more activity there. But anyway, I wrote those two notes down.
Anything else for Jan on this topic? Okay,
Have we ever thought about putting the Rambler on a website? I don't know if that's probably not a Board of Ed thing, but just, I think that could be an interesting.
what's
Do they?
Rand?
They have an online version.
I didn't know that.
They have an online version. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's great.
All right, great. Then let's see here, that is both the general plans for communication and the communication log update. That moves us to board roles, responsibilities and operations, for which there is a meeting topic, effectiveness of meetings. I'm just gonna note that, go back to the, part of this is public and part is executive session, right? Jack, I don't know, this is your first.
Yes.
Board meeting, leadership meeting, so the Freedom of Information, law requires the board to meet in open session on nearly all of its, business. But if you're talking about the performance of an individual employee or member of the board, you can go into executive session. So if the board's talking about its effectiveness as a body, then that's public. If you're talking about, I in Littlefield as a board member can be more effective if I change it up this way, or I'm concerned that, we need to give better feedback to the superintendent about this, that, or the other thing, that's an executive session. So the only reason I mention that now is because effectiveness of meetings can be both. To the extent it's effectiveness of your, like, is the agenda the right length? Are we staying too late? Are we hitting the right topics? Right, those are public discussions. If it's, the actions of individual board members are making meetings very efficient or making meetings not efficient, then that's in executive session. So, I would say we should talk about effectiveness of meetings for the public part of that, and then there might be other things that are appropriate to the executive session. So go ahead, Karen.
I want to bring something up, and I think it kind of fits in here, and I brought this up in very general terms a while back, but there's never an appropriate time to. You may recall that I brought this up and I gave this to Jan at the time. It was from, I think, the Ellington or Bloomfield Board of Education Superintendent. Just some information he posted in the Cape Journal, added some language to the audience of citizens, which I think generally the audience, most people don't understand the scope of our responsibility as a board. So we can choose to add something, part of it, none of it, or just put this to bed and I'm done. But I wanted to read it, and then, and there's actually a copy for you. I'll look at that too. And then we can decide if we want to add any of this language at all, because our meeting conduct right now talks about, speakers identify themselves, we don't respond to questions, timekeeping, no boisterous conduct, that kind of thing, but it doesn't get into so what he says is warm welcome to anybody in attendance, followed by a narrative highlighting the rules of conduct and engagement for the meeting, which we're doing, and clarifies the roles of the board and the superintendent. And this is the quote: we are here to set goals, listen to reports of the superintendent, approve budgets, contracts, and personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. The statement reads: we are not here to make management decisions or solve the problems of individuals. I'm not sure I like that line, but anyway, management is the responsibility of the superintendent, end quote. So I don't know if clarifying our role makes sense in the meeting conduct section of the agenda. I just want to throw it out there, see what you think. whatever.
So can I just restate it back to make sure that I'm understanding it?
Sure.
There, in Bluefield, they have a, explanatory note, if you will, under their audience of citizens or on their agenda related to their audience of citizens. It's here in this, and you just read it. What you're asking the board is, should we use something like that here and add it?
All or part or not.
All or part or something else?
Yes, something
Yeah,
that just defines our role, which is not done here at all.
right, okay.
That's all.
Can I ask a clarifying question? This may be related to what you just asked.
Mhm.
So this meeting conduct,
Yeah.
tone is with respect to public comment.
Mhm.
Is your comment related to board conduct? Or are you
No.
speaking about adding this so for the public comment, so that the public
Public
understands?
understands what our role is, so when
Okay.
they're talking to us in an audience of citizens, they don't have a
Expect something from us. that they're
misunderstanding
gonna
of
get.
what we can provide them. But we say we don't respond here, but this just clarifies our role as a board, what we can and cannot do. Just a
Right,
thought.
you have a statement on your agenda right now, right, that includes some information for the public, right?
Yeah.
You don't respond to specific questions, although a topic may be formally added to an agenda, either at this meeting or at a later meeting. The superintendent may respond to clarify or, otherwise, or the board chair may respond, and then the other rules about time
Yeah,
and
timekeeping.
place, manner, and things of that nature.
So just for consideration, just defining our role. So the audience knows what our role is,
So-
because I don't think
Yeah.
most people know what our role is.
So
We don't have to use a specific language, but it's just,
the benefit would be you'd be communicating to the public to say, this is,
yes,
this is, to use Dr. Thompson's phrase, this is
Yeah.
our lane.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are we looking to actually, just redo the policy? Are we just looking to?
Well, it is a bylaw, so it would have to be revised.
so,
Unless it's covered somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can I correct?
Yeah.
There's just a thought,
Eileen.
that maybe what Karen's suggesting, but certainly for this groups, maybe could come to a policy committee and we can look at that and reword it. And then would come before this board to see if they would adopt it.
That's what I
It
would
just seems like
propose
it's
is that,
something that might be more inclusive than taking a look at it tonight, because we
Right.
already see it.
yeah, no, that's fine
That's
with me. I just didn't know where the appropriate time or place to
Yeah.
bring it up, and it is a bylaw, so yes, so I
And
think.
it's
submitting it for a first
effective
reading,
reading.
how does
It's
that?
the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, it's about effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Meetings
Karina,
technically,
No.
so.
anything else on that, Jim? No?
Yes.
Jane?
I do think there, parents, families are, not sure, don't understand what, say, the parent-teacher organization does in a school versus what the Board of Ed does versus what the administrators, teachers do in the schools. And when they, think about how to bring forward a complaint regarding something, do you start with the Board of Ed? Do you start with the PTO, PTA? Do you start with the principal? And so if we, again, going back to communication, trying to make it better understood to people who don't come to these meetings, don't need to come to these meetings, whose responsibilities different things reside in.
And it might also be, and I'll give you this copy, Chair, but it might also be maybe a small narrative on our website under the, we can even consider doing something like that. I know that there's still people who think we decide on snow days, it's just like, no.
Do you have your board manual? You have a Board of Ed member
We've got-
manual?
We have bylaws and we have a board.
We have-
of Right,
And
and
you
that's,
posted on the website?
No.
they're accessible on the website. All of the bylaws are accessible on the
No,
website.
No, the member,
Oh,
the Board of Ed member him.
I think it is. It
I'm
is,
just curious,
'cause
because
I-
that would be another place that people.
I think it is.
Right,
So that's my comment, it's related to what Kelly just said. If this isn't already covered somewhere, which it may very well be, covered in the rest of the bylaws associated with the Board of Education.
Right.
And I think, to kind of get to Jane's comment, I think we each have a responsibility that when a parent approaches us with a complaint, right? Because that's typically what happens. Our responsibility is to coach them to the proper avenues, right? Which would be, did you talk to the teacher? Did you talk to the administration? If you feel that those, you haven't been heard, direct them to Jan for another couple weeks. But that's sort of a commitment that we have as board members to provide that insight. And, you know, that's just.
So my only suggestion was, I agree with all of that, was aligning this to audience assistance.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
that was my
That way
only,
they get it when they're here.
yes, because, yeah, that's all, no, you know.
Kelly, and then,
I think it's probably to go back to the policy committee to evaluate, is it already listed here? Like if it's in a bylaw or the handbook or something else. What's the source? And then maybe put that source or an excerpt of the source onto the back of the meeting agenda so that it's like clearer and referenceable word at the meeting, right? So you can point back to say like, this is in the scope, this is not in the scope, it's available right on one of the materials, it's available at every single one of the meetings. It's just, I don't know off the top of my head where that lies, and if it doesn't land somewhere and it's only in the board handbook, then evaluate if that's the right place for it.
I was gonna say that I think we can always look at it, you know, as a member or chairman of the policy committee, but I think there's an aspect that we might be missing. So when people come to a board meeting, they're kind of nervous. They're like, what do we say? How do we do it? And I'm thinking that there's an aspect that when they come, and I don't know if we've been keeping up with that, where whomever is the chairperson, whoever can be reading this, to be able to say, we're so glad that you're here. We just wanted to share some things with you. It doesn't have to, and we could just say one thing, which might be the number 6 that said, you know, speakers are required to refrain from presentations that discuss specific employees. I'm just
Typically,
saying,
Trevor reads the entire thing.
but I'm
and
just
it's
saying
not
that sometimes
inconsistent.
you might have to do that, but that's something that I know that when it came as a parent, you know, that's a specific piece that they're like, oh, but that addresses, I'm just saying that addresses a lot of, you know, concerns for families when they come to kind of, and then it says right here at the bottom, but it shouldn't be just given so that they're reading it because that's not, they're not gonna read it and understand.
Jan, Kelly, to your point, in the bylaws, there's another, bylaw that says code of conduct for board members, and I think this is as close as we're gonna get. There are 5 things listed, but one of them is refrain from interfering with the implementation of a board policy decision by the administration, refrain from interfering with the duties of any school district official, and refrain from divulging to anyone any aspect of matters considered and discussed in executive session. That's as close as it gets to what you're talking about. I don't know how close that is, but that does exist right now.
Where is that?
That is in series 9,000 bylaws, and it's code of conduct for board members.
Right, but this is for an audience of citizens. to
Right,
talk
but-
about.
But it's kind of, it's in line with
Okay.
saying, this is what we do and don't do.
Oh, I
It's
see,
mostly
I see,
worded
I
as
see.
what you don't do, and I'm not sure if that's the
Right,
same thing.
right.
so actually,
Yeah,
as
it's
you
probably
all,
more positive.
Yeah.
as you all are talking about, there's actually 2 threads, right? There's can we give the public more information about what our role is, right? And then there's, the thread of, can we make it a more welcoming statement, right?
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
separate
Karen,
things.
I just heard her say that like, maybe we don't need to read this entire thing. Maybe it's just, I'll direct you to the meeting conduct on the back of the agenda. I do want to call special attention to the fact that, you know, we're not gonna make any decisions tonight. We're probably not gonna respond to what you have to say. And we're glad you're here or whatever it is,
Right, I
but
was
like some
gonna say,
welcome.
because that's something
to
that-
consider.
I think that they're looking at, yeah.
I think there's generally a misconception in the community about what we're talking about, in terms of what the board actually does, and that's how I think some people think they come to a board meeting and, oh yeah, you're gonna decide this, and I'm gonna, I think that's one of the big issues that people don't know how to approach.
So this would be helpful.
Yeah, yes,
for
it'd
that.
be very helpful.
Yeah. Do people have a consensus that, having the policy committee take a first crack at it and go through the existing?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Sure.
That's the best stuff.
Okay, Jen.
Yeah, even as a parent, my impression of the situation was if the parent had an issue with the way something in school was not being handled, you talk to the teacher first, then you talk to the building administrator, and you talk to, I'm assuming the superintendent after that. If if there was an instance in which a parent did not feel that the superintendent, I'm talking about a different superintendent here, was not playing by the rules or following the board policies to, I don't know, if it's board satisfaction or their satisfaction, is that something that you, Tyler, as the board chairman, would, well, I take it back. In a hypothetical case, Jan, would you talk to the board chairperson to say, the situation that's brewing, I don't know if you've heard anything about it in the town, but person X feels like, either they or their children were not being treated fairly in school, and this is how I handled it. And then the board chairperson will look at the policy and say, these two things are either the same thing as what you think, or different from what you think, and maybe the board needs to discuss that. I'm not sure if it ever gets that, or got to that level with you or any preceding board chair.
Well, anytime someone says to me, I'm gonna talk to the Board of Education, I tell them that's perfectly within your rights to do that, just so you know, public comments at the beginning of the meeting, you can read all about it. I refer them, I give them all the access information they need. If I think it's going to be something that Trevor needs a heads up on so that he can plan the meeting, then I will tell him that, or tell all three of the executive board folks that there's this issue brewing that probably will come to the board. So they're not sitting here thinking what's happening. Because they have to manage it. But sometimes, no, sometimes if an issue is brewing, sometimes it just kind of comes organically up through the ranks and ends up here. Once in a while I'm caught off guard, but not typically. And there've been very few. We have very few parents come to our meetings.
Well, given that misunderstanding, I mean, it's not too pleasant for myself or any other board member to go into Stop and Shop and say, hey, there was a sexual harassment complaint going on and nobody did anything about it in the school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about that because I'm neither the superintendent or the board
Right.
chairperson.
Right,
So,
they're so confused about your
Right.
role and what you would know, and of
Right.
course you wouldn't know something like that unless it came to the board for some reason, by the person. So I think that, to Karen's point, if you're not looking for my opinion, so I'll just be quiet.
I am looking for, where was
I
that? for?
I think,
Looking for
I think
guidance.
it would be great to explain to people your role as a board, especially at a board meeting, where they think they'll be getting a remedy at the board meeting. And your point, there's never a remedy provided at the meeting.
And I'll just take a stab for a minute. Sorry, Charlie. I was taking out the corner of my
I
eye.
just wanna commend Jim, because a couple weeks ago, he was contacted by a parent. And he actually directed the parent to me, so basically, the situation is, so.
I didn't ask him what it was about. I
I know,
just knew that
but-
Trevor was the man to talk to, not me.
But you did appropriately, you mentioned that, to come to me, they did, and I talked to Jen.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
I-
now they get the facts.
And I'm assuming if it's important enough, then Trevor will, or Jan will tell the rest of us, but if not, okay,
Right.
that's being handled.
Well, if it becomes part of the evaluation of the superintendent, and that's our role, right?
Right.
Like, that's where the line is. If it's about superintendent's performance and communication around the issue, around how they addressed it, or whatever we're evaluating that individual on at the end of the day, right? Then that's our priority question.
Right, what I was gonna add in just prior to Trevor, and then we'll go to Ivy and Steve, is that there's some things that the administration can't bring to you as a board, because they're not supposed to, right? There are confidentiality concerns for teacher issues. There's a statutory requirement that you all be a neutral, unbiased body if some teacher is contesting being dismissed or being recommended for dismissal. And for student matters under FERPA, you're not supposed to have access to individual student information except in very specific circumstances like an expulsion hearing or a residency matter or something of that nature. So what could come up, as Kelly notes, is consistent complaints that the administration isn't handling this, that, or the other thing. So those aggregated things, right, that de-identified are good for you all, right, to know about and understand how the superintendent is addressing them. And that's part of that evaluation piece. Or if you have a policy that isn't effective in addressing concerns, that once again is aggregated and de-identified to bring that matter to you, right? Or if you need resources for something, right? Where you have a problem with
the trainer. I don't have money
The
for the
trainer,
trainer.
right, exactly, and you're gonna get 7 complaints from parents whose
Right.
kids have sprained ankles or whatever. That's gonna come to you because it's a resource issue, right? So budget, policy, and evaluation, those are, those are your pockets. All right, Eileen,
So it's just sort of an information question. So each principal usually has, a PTO meeting, you know, with families. And I'm just curious for those families that maybe aren't professionals, that they might not know that they first go to the teacher and then they go to the principal. So do you know, like Janet, that's probably, it probably is addressed at some of those meetings, or how would parents really learn about, they would know to go to the teacher and they would, you know, that, and that first.
Well, I mean, no, I think it's handled more on an individual basis, so, you know, I think most folks just use the common sense protocols, and they say, all right, then I have an issue with this teacher, let me start with the teacher.
Okay,
If for some reason they're not comfortable doing it, they usually go to guidance counselor or administrator, and often the guidance counselor or administrator will support the parent in working back with the teacher to preserve that relationship. You know, give some language or say, would you like me to pave the way for that conversation? Like I might say, do you want to call him directly, or do you want me to call first and say, you're gonna give him a call? You know, just because you really want those boots on the ground relationships to be good relationships, you know, and not the superintendent or the principal fixing it for everybody, because that's not healthy.
And the good news is when we have audience of citizens, we haven't really had too many people that are crossing that line that you have to say,
No,
you know, go back to your teacher because this is not the
we've
necessary.
not had
It really
active,
happens.
active concerns come this way very often.
Steve.
Yeah, so I want to tie back into Kelly and a little bit of what you said about issues going on. I believe you called them de-identified. Right?
Yes, de-identified aggregate information about.
Which has never been brought to this board in my time on the board. We've never had a list of de-identified aggregate concerns that have been brought forward in their schools for that evaluation piece. So if that's never brought forward to us to see any trends, then how are we evaluating?
I'll just let Jan address whether that is true. Either we haven't had significant issues that need to come forward, or.
They get resolved at the building level. I rarely get issues that come
Yeah.
in.
What that, I guess we're missing, maybe I'm not making myself clear, it sometimes happens. Whether it was addressed or not at the school level by the administration there, or was brought here for the administration in this central office. If there was an issue that had to be elevated to any step of that process, and it wasn't de-identified and then brought forward to everybody here, then we're not able to see if there's any kind of trends in our school systems, if there's any, whether or not, you know, it's being addressed, that's not the question. I would be curious is, well, if we had a complaint one year, second year, we had the same complaint, de-identified again, I don't know who they are, I don't know what the parties are, I don't know what the outcomes. We had a complaint here, we had 2 complaints this year, and 3 complaints this next year. There's a trend. So my concern would be, well, why is there this trend? Whether or not they're addressed at that level or at this level, you know, the central office. Still a trend that we know nothing about.
I would only expect them to come forward if they were unresolved. Or if the board had an affirmative decision within its purview that it needed to address. So the examples I had given were, your athletic trainer one is perfect, because you had it tonight.
Right.
You had to have the authority to do a bid waiver, right? And the administration had a problem. It was unresolved based on FAM's data over 40 years of
Pieced it together.
trying to get the bid. They came to you and they said, we need you to take action. If they had successfully found an athletic trainer year after year, it would be a line item in the budget, athletic trainer.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's a budget example. Let me give a student a more complaint basis one to try to get you closer to what you're trying to get at. If there was a specific complaint at a building and it was about one of the principals or about one of the teachers or what have you, and it was even repetitive, and it made its way up to Jan. Jan's role would be or the superintendent's role, no matter who is sitting in that particular seat, to work with the building, if it's a teacher, to work with the building administration to ensure that the teacher's performance is remediated so that those issues are not recurring. If it's not remediated, then Jan would be working with the administration to either get professional development or employ a disciplinary process, or eventually up to a dismissal. Then your role by statute would be to act as a hearing body relative to that. So that's not gonna make it to you unless it gets to that that statutory place. So maybe that's a more clear example.
It's not. So,
Okay,
so my issue is, all right, teacher X has an issue, improper material in the classroom. All right,
okay,
so it's addressed at the administrative level.
yes,
Okay, that's 3 years ago. The next year, we have a different teacher. We actually have 2 teachers the next year. Inappropriate material in the classrooms.
yep,
Okay, again, addressed at the level, we're not told about it, right? Because it didn't reach that level of being terminated,
correct.
right? Year 3, now we have 5 teachers that have been complaints of inappropriate material in the classroom.
Right.
There's a trend. How do we evaluate the administration and what they're doing if we are not told of the trends that are going on in the schools?
Well, I think,
We're leaving it, so it's my job, right? It's our job to evaluate the superintendent.
correct.
If we're not told all of the information, we're only told the good stuff, how do we provide it accurate? But if there's stuff going on in the school, that there's a trend, there, you know, in that case, in that example.
Yep.
There is a trend, what I would look at and say, ugh, do we really have a control on what we expect our teachers to be teaching in our Old Saybrook schools?
What I would expect is that if there was a significant issue relative to curriculum or instruction, which is what you're talking about, selection of materials, that would come to you as a board issue because you have a curriculum process and things of that nature. If
I would push back, because we don't have that process in place, and we don't have any requirements for that reporting to come to us.
We have a
you have a curriculum process,
Yeah, we have
because you must by
And
statute.
any primary text, any primary resource has to come forward. You haven't seen any of that because we're not really adopting textbooks anymore. You know, we don't, we've done that in the last.
What about secondary text that the teacher may use to individualize their learning?
You'd have to set aside like half of each of your meetings to go through all of that. That's unusual. I've never seen that. But certainly, I guess the board could say you want to approve every single resource. I don't think you'll.
No, that's not what I'm getting, I mean, I would imagine if we're talking about high school English, for example, high school English head, is what they used to call it back in my day,
Yeah,
would be the person out, hey, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, can I use this in my class? And then Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, that's the department head, would say, yes, that's acceptable within, you know, what I know about Jan and the curriculum director and the town of Old Saybrook.
yeah.
And what types of things would be relevant to their learning, which would probably be different from if you're in Washington DC trying to learn something.
Yeah, would be different.
So I understand it'd be a little bit more burden on the individual department heads, but at least you'd have a guardrail in place to say, you're going a little bit off the rails there. You know, tone that back, and I'm not telling you exactly what to teach in your class, but it can't be that.
And that's what the curriculum director and the administration, that's part of their role to keep the teachers on track relative to those.
I think-
But in all honesty, an individual poem or piece, you know, an art or 1-page, 2-page article that the teacher found yesterday and wants to use in class today, that probably would not go through a vetting process. That's where we rely on the professionalism and the understanding of the context. And then sometimes somebody misunderstands the context and then action needs to be taken.
Well, I read the poem that they did last year, and it wasn't very fair and balanced, as they say.
So in a situation where somebody has gone outside the guardrails that are just in place by understanding the community you're working in, then administration takes action.
Right.
Okay.
But again, there's no de-identified process that comes back to the board that says, hey, this year we had X amount of complaints on these types of things. So that the board can sit here and say, hey, superintendent, we really don't like this trend. What are we doing to ensure that our teachers and our education reflects the community of Old Saybrook? So if it's never reported back to us, how do we know?
It's reported back to you when you need to take action. I think is
But
what,
when it comes time for me to evaluate the job that's being done at the superintendent's position, if there are issues going on in the school that we don't know at a de-identified level, how do I make a fair and balanced judgment of the work that's being done if I don't have the full picture of the work that's being done?
so you don't think you have enough information to evaluate the superintendent?
Correct.
Well, that's a different issue. So if that's the case, you should,
And I'm not sure if this is for executive session,
well,
if we're talking about a specific position now.
no, we're talking about a process.
Okay.
So I'm fine with that, although I will say we're not on effective meetings right now. Which is actually your agenda item. So, it's a fair point that we should probably stay on that topic for FOI reasons. And to the extent that it relates to individuals, let's go back to it in the executive session. Great.
So back on the topic of effective meetings.
Yep.
And again, you can give me guidance as to does this,
Yep.
is this more general? We implemented a process by which there's a Google Sheet in our folder to make suggestions about things that should come before the board. And I think that it has proved to be effective for some items. But like I put at least one, maybe two on that was a while ago and haven't gotten any feedback on. So I want to understand that process more. Like we had an email from the Ellington Board of Education about an issue. And so I thought we should really discuss that as a board. And we haven't said anything. Yes, yeah. And there was something else that just came out again today, which reminded me of it. I'm like, you know, so I want to understand, we've implemented this process, but it doesn't feel like there's a circular closed loop communication process to ensure that it's getting addressed in a timely way.
This is the process for putting items on the agenda for discussion.
This is, yes, as identified by board members.
Yes.
Is that something that, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
is that something that should be, that we all review and either kind of weigh in yes or no for everything? You know, I mean, maybe that's just a process, because I understand what you mean. You put something on there and back in February, I looked at it today.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Let's talk about the law about that as well as what is likely your policy. The typical bylaws would have the superintendent and the board chair constructing a board agenda. Yeah, and typical bylaws, and I don't know yours, you know, with eidetic memory,
right.
but would have a process for board members to suggest items. And then there's a statute that says if 3 board members want to, it actually says want to have a special meeting, but
Right.
effectively want an agenda item because it can happen at a regular meeting.
Right.
And it relates to the board's business, right? So because you could want to have something about the town needs a new fire truck and
Yeah.
we don't have to add that to
Right.
the agenda because
Yeah.
it's not within your purview.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so 3 board members can
Right.
band
But-
together, but normally it's the superintendent and the board putting it together and making difficult decisions about, we have to do these 12 items within
Yeah,
this
does
time
it
frame.
fit or does it need to go
Exactly.
later? But right, like
Exactly.
it's, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's unclear to me, how do the other board members become aware that that's on there unless they randomly check?
And that's what I was gonna say, honestly, I kind of forgot about it. There's gotta be some sort of alert that.
Right, there's no,
someone's
yeah, there's
supposed to-
no,
I honestly just forgot about that.
I know, yeah,
About the process
About
for
the Google,
suggesting.
about the Google.
right. So
Yeah.
she wouldn't remember to check and see
I-
like,
no, I-
gosh, and it shouldn't, I don't think it should be board members' responsibility. It's like, cause there's a column on there that says like, who else on the board supports this? Well, how do these guys, like, am I supposed to?
Unless you get
email
a ring out.
Right, exactly, and I
Yeah.
don't think that's.
Trevor or anybody else?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, actually do look at that list, but some of the issues we have is, I know in some meetings we have things we have to accomplish. So I know you have an item on February on that list, and, you know, shouldn't get on the agenda yet. So I talked to you like the last meeting, maybe the next meeting we can try to get on that. But that's sort of how, I do look at it for every meeting.
We haven't talked about that topic though, at all.
I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
usually I do look at, I print a copy of it every time I look at it, and if something's like, okay, we need to address this, we do talk about it sometimes in executive session. And I do talk to Jen about items we need to put on the agenda, where we do our best to get things out, so. Sometimes it just takes a little bit longer, unfortunately.
So maybe we need to take a, sorry. I didn't
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Maybe we need to take a look at just the process for notifying when a new topic goes on for board member review and then the communication process about, okay, we've seen who's on here, we've determined it's an agenda item, or we haven't determined that it's gonna go on the agenda and why it hasn't gone on the agenda. Either there's not enough support for it or it's not gonna fit in at this particular meeting because we have to cover X, Y, and Z as like standing agenda items and it's gonna get pushed to another month or whatever else it is that kind of the feedback consensus? It's the two parts, the communication, how do we evaluate the topics that come on?
Because I know I think it was like other board members can agree with the
Right.
suggested.
Yeah,
But
but how do you know?
yeah,
Right, so you- maybe a strengthening of that process.
And the goal of-
Not everything.
The goal of it was to allow us to have
Yeah.
that discussion, so to get those three
Yeah.
members to have it pushed onto the agenda. Without sending out, hey, this is what I wanna do as a group email and risk creating a meeting.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Hmm.
Right.
So, and I imagine
Yeah.
that there may be a way on that document for it to be set up that once something's added, an alert is sent out to the people that are on it, and I bet Trevor or
that
Trent
knows how to do that.
would best
yeah,
on how to do that.
yeah.
And the other thing I think sometimes,
Yeah.
maybe my experience is that when board members may present a topic, it's something that's of interest to them individually. And it can get resolved between the superintendent and the board member. If it's something that they really would like, that's a trust that you have with the superintendent, you know, okay, that's a topic, let's see, that's probably gonna take this amount of time, we need to discuss it versus connecting with the board member and addressing it there. Not everything has to come to the board.
Correct, but I think you will find that my suggestion is
I-
directly associated to the
I'm
entire
not-
board.
I'm not
and
saying
something- Yeah, no,
it's
you're making a
anything.
good point.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that you have to trust the superintendent, be able to take whatever it is that you're suggesting and perhaps weaving it into something that would be applicable.
Well, certainly for new board members who are kind of trying to learn about what comes up to the board level and what
Mhm.
doesn't come up to the board level, some dialogue with the superintendent would make good sense.
Right.
Kelly, do you have something?
No, I think that's a fair point, Eileen. I think it's just then the communications circle back to say, okay, we determined that this was gonna get handled via this mechanism. It won't be on the agenda, case closed, whatever it is, or it will be, or on our purview, whatever the
Yeah.
resolution column is on that document. Maybe we need one of those to say, plan for whatever agenda or how it got handled.
So Jan, probably.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember. Okay, anything else on the fact of board meetings? No, okay. I'm gonna suggest we take a short break before the executive session. That'll enable Jan to figure out how to shut off the YouTube part of,
Steve, you want to grab some dinner this
and we'll come back.
Thank you, guys. I hate it.
Come back in 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure.
Let them start.